Welcome to another episode of Called Bank Sports. The Jazz are doing great, so I think there's reason to celebrate. We're 7-1, best record through 8 games, which is a lot better than we were last season through 8 games. So, and there's some news to talk about with the Jazz. We have a couple injuries. We have a back-to-back coming up this weekend, which we'll talk about. Talk about the upcoming schedule, but overall, ratings-wise, through 8 games, the Jazz look like an elite team, just like they looked last season. So, what are your thoughts so far, Nate?
Yeah, I'm really happy with the first 8 games, but I'm kind of tentatively, like you said, the Jazz are looking a lot better through the first 8 games last year. And I hope that continues, but we've seen that there can be a turnaround at this point. So as the Jazz are looking to possibly not have Donovan Mitchell and Royce ONeale in some of the upcoming games, that's definitely concerning. But overall, it's awesome to be at the top of the West right now. You do have the Warriors who are in second place, but that's only because they've played one less game. And personally, I am floored with how well Golden State has been doing. Definitely a lot of people who are going to lose money on betting against the Warriors, I feel like, this year. But it's been great to just see the Jazz continue to fight and to watch them win games with defense. They have been putting up a decent amount of points, but their three-point shooting has been abysmal this year so far. I think the only game they've shot over 40% was last night against the Hawks. And you've had players like Royce ONeale, who is currently kind of in a slump, Jordan Clarkson, who missed 24 or 25 straight three-pointers before coming alive in the Hawks game in the second half to win the game for the Jazz, and really just kind of seeing when they can get it all together. Since they've won 7 games, but those haven't been super pretty games, and a win is the most important thing. But I do want to see the Jazz have a more unified attack and to be a bit more dominant when it comes to point differential like they were last year.
Yeah, and because there was that stretch last year where they just took off. It felt like every game was a blowout, and we were shocked if the game was ever within 10 points in the fourth quarter. I would love to see a lot more of that this year, but even though they've been shooting bad, their turnover problems have kept on. That's been a problem for a long time. Even with those, they've only lost 1 game. They beat the Hawks, which the Hawks are a good team without Donovan Mitchell, and our point differentials are still looking really good compared to every other team in the league. So I don't think the shooting slump will last for a long time. And the second that it starts clicking for the whole team, then we're going to start seeing a lot more of those blowouts. And it might take a little bit longer, which I'm okay as long as we're still winning games. Because I imagine when Rudy Gays comes back in, there's going to be a learning curve. Well, not back in, but in for the first time.
Yeah,
going to be a learning curve there. But if the Jazz get a top 3 seed, I don't think there's a huge advantage whether they're third or second or first in the West. I think they're going to play a tough first round as long as they're ready for the playoffs. That's what I care about.
I agree with you there, and I think a lot of people are talking about when Rudy Gays comes back, just the Jazz are going to dominate, which I would hope so. And if bringing in a player who's going, and if any player is going to have a minimal impact on the team, it is going to be Rudy Gays, who's playing kind of in that 9th man, 8th man spot on their rotation. He's not going to be super vital in the sense of like he's coming in as a starter, right? But again, I mean, you need a 9-man deep team or 10-man deep team to be able to be a title contender. Like, you can't have that 9th spot just be some random, I'm trying to think of another name. I was going to say some random Joe, but I very much like the Jazz's random Joe. So I think that'll be good. But like you said, it is going to kind of cause a learning curve. But at the same time, I mean, the Jazz have been playing a decent amount with Hassan, Pascal, Forrest, and Butler, and hasn't been the cleanest minutes. But again, I mean, it's been pretty solid with them out on the court, especially Whiteside.
Yeah, and Whiteside's been killing it, which I feel like I need to point out Whiteside's performance a little more because I was really hesitant, and I want to show, like, even though I was wrong, I'm excited that he's doing great. But to talk about how deep the Jazz bench is, we talked about this a ton last year. We hit it over and over and over again. But last year, I think it proved it. And coming into this year, we have an even deeper bench. We have the sixth man of the year, the runner-up for sixth man of the year. We have Rudy Gay, who scored 12 points coming off the bench last year. We have Hassan Whiteside, who has been just a not quite as good Rudy Gobert so far this year. He's been filling his assignment perfectly. And then we have players like Pascal, who I'm fine seeing him play in the playoffs. Like he's not going to come in and go crazy, but he hustles. He plays good basketball. He doesn't make mistakes. There's other players like that I like seeing minutes from. So I think we have a deep bench, and when come playoff time, we'll have a really solid 9-man rotation, and our 10th man isn't bad either.
Yeah. And speaking of players, I feel like Royce ONeale needs a shout out for just continually being good. His 3-point shooting is struggling a bit this year, like a lot of other players, not just on the Jazz, but in the league. But he's been able to do a really good job just continuing to be a lockdown defender. And I think a lot of that, and something that makes me even more hopeful in his success down the line this season, is that he's no longer the Jazz's second leading rebounder. He was consistently, getting 7, 8, 9 boards, like not competing per se with Rudy Gobert, but he did have his games where he beat Rudy Gobert for rebounds last year. And this year you have Gobert averaging about 17, Hassan averaging about 8, and then you have Bojan, Donovan, Royce ONeale all averaging about 4.5. So having other players pick up the slack on rebounding, making it so you pretty much don't always have Gobert or ONeale getting the board, is hopefully going to kind of spread the load and make it so ONeale is able to stay in shape and have a bit more gas, not just on a game-to-game basis, but on a season basis as well.
Yeah, and I hesitate to make this comparison because he's not nearly at this defensive level, but Royce ONeale kind of needs to fit in that role of Tony Allen that Tony Allen did for his entire career. And Royce ONeale, like he has a 3-point shot, so he's more viable on offense than Tony Allen. But Tony Allen would come down and it would be the toughest night for anyone who he guards. And that's kind of where Royce ONeale needs to be, even if his box score ends up being he's averaging 5 points a game and 4 rebounds a game. Like he's one of those utility players that he just doesn't show up on the box score.
Yeah, but I mean, he's vital, right? Since how many times do you look at a starting 5 and think, oh, all of these players are all-stars, or all of these players are just an elite NBA players? And the reason for that being is, I mean, the salary cap really hinders you from doing that. And also, like, can you imagine if you had one of the better, what is Royce plays? He ends up being power forward or small forward, kind of mixing with Bojan on that. Like, would Paul George be happy with the Royce ONeale role if he was on the Jazz? No, he wouldn't be. Like, you need a player who's willing to be a starter, but also willing to be that 5th guy. And so having someone like Royce ONeale is a big boon for the Jazz. And if he continues to play well, like, I mean, a lot of people talk about Gobert being the Jazz's floor and Mitchell being the Jazz's ceiling. But I dare say that Royce, is kind of in there on the ceiling as well, where if he's able to lock down and get some threes up in a game, I'm pretty confident the Jazz are winning that matchup.
Yeah, 100%. Speaking of Royce ONeale, and Donovan Mitchell's always on mind. We have a back-to-back coming up this weekend. And both of they're both listed as questionable, which, as we kind of discussed before the episode, that probably means we won't see either of them for this back-to-back. Obviously, it's two games. We've been looking good so far. What are you looking for this weekend from the Jazz, and kind of what are you expecting there?
So the one thing I'd say about Royce is I believe that he was listed as questionable before the Hawks game. So he did play that game. But I definitely do feel that even if we see Donovan tomorrow night, we're not going to see Donovan against Orlando. And we're all well acquainted with Mike Conley playing the most important game typically of a back-to-back. So he'll be playing tomorrow night when the Jazz play the Heat, but I can't imagine seeing him play against Orlando, and pretty sure the team has made that clear. So my question is, how bad is the sprain, right? Since if Royce could play on Thursday, but Donovan couldn't, and they're listed with the same injury, I don't think that we're going to see Donovan Mitchell be out for like 2-3 weeks, right? But it would not surprise me if we don't see him this weekend. And even if we do see him tomorrow, if all of a sudden the Jazz are playing Orlando without 2 of their 5 starters, and I'm still confident they can pick up a win. But it is kind of concerning that Donovan Mitchell's ankle seems to be aggravating him this early on in the season.
Yeah. And it's not like any of his injuries have been huge. Like I know Gobert earlier in his career, like it was scary every time Gobert went down because you're like, is he going to be out for the next 4 months? Luckily, we haven't seen that from Gobert in recent years. He has gotten a little bit bigger, built some muscle, which has protected him. Donovan Mitchell, we've seen those nagging injuries, and I'm kind of curious, like, is it just like, because last time he stayed out a long time and there's kind of drama, he wanted to come back earlier.
Yeah.
And so Donovan Mitchell's injuries are going to be something interesting to follow. I don't think it's going to be a huge concern, but then again, you always play the what if game in the NBA. What if Donovan Mitchell was healthy all through the playoffs last year, and could he have pulled out the Clippers series? Like, and the what if game is rough, but you always need to like think about that and think about like, even if this is a minor sprain, I feel like the Jazz are kind of balanced in this thing where they want to make sure he comes back when he's actually 100% with zero risk of re-injury and making it worse. But they also want to balance the relationship with Mitchell because he wants to play. So whoever makes that call is kind of walking a tightrope here and trying to get the Jazz to a championship.
Yeah, well, I mean, looking at the Hawks game, I don't believe that Donovan wouldn't play in that game or wouldn't be rested in that game per se. But at the same time, the Hawks had just lost to the Nets in Brooklyn and had to fly down to Atlanta to play a home game. So it's a home game, but if you are going to rest Donovan, that's possible. I mean, it's a slightly better game to rest him. Again, I don't think that's the case, but you are right about where is this ankle going to take him. I believe he came out at some point either after the season and said, yeah, my ankle, even during the regular season when I wasn't playing, was a lot worse than the team was saying. So, and obviously we saw him re-aggravate it in the Clippers series. And like you said, playing the what if game doesn't really get you anywhere. But then all of a sudden you look at the Bucks last year, who had played the what if game for the previous 2 seasons, and then got to play the what if game last year. Or, oh, what if KD, instead of taking a 3-pointer, his foot's on the line and all of a sudden we're in overtime? Like, what if instead of the 76ers making it to the Eastern Conference Finals, the Atlanta Hawks make it there? Like, you know, what if we end up playing the Suns and Chris Paul's injured? And all of a sudden, all those what ifs stacked up and Giannis has a ring. And I mean, as a Jazz fan, yes, I'd prefer to play every team healthy and, you know, earn that ring. But at the same time, I want to see the Jazz win the finals. So even if there's a big asterisk there, I want that finals here in Utah, and I'm fine playing a what if game one season if it actually works out.
Yeah, and if you're going to have an asterisk championship, I think now is one of the best times to have one. Every championship is great for every team, but we've had so much asterisk talk that we've all kind of come to the realization that every championship has one. So people will play that game, but I think the players around the league will respect whoever the champion is. And I think Kevin Durant kind of led that with he sees the Bucks as the champions. He said, hey, even if we beat the Bucks, there's no promise we would even win the championship. So he's like, stuff happens. Like you can never just say, oh, if James Harden, like if you had another chance with James Harden healthy in the whole series, like you don't know if he's going to get re-injured or what happens, because you can always put the what if on top of the what if.
Yeah, you can always go down that rabbit hole. So I agree. In the end, I am thinking that Donovan Mitchell's ankle sprain is probably relatively minor. I haven't seen anything super official from the team, and I haven't heard anything from press conferences. But I mean, he was fine in the Kings game. There's no reason that I've seen anywhere to believe that he did something in that game. And obviously he can do something in practice. But I mean, I'm assuming the Jazz went and flew out the next morning to Atlanta and then practiced some in Atlanta. So if anything, I think it's probably more of a tweak than anything to be super concerned about. But we'll see that over this weekend. If he doesn't play against the Heat, I don't think he'll play against Orlando. So if he doesn't play tomorrow, which begins to be a bit more concerning, I think the real question ends up being when Atlanta comes to Salt Lake next Tuesday to see if Donovan's playing. And if he's not, then it's definitely a lot more serious than anyone's led on to.
Yeah. It's always tricky, and there's going to be lots of news about the star when they're injured. But like you said, I don't feel it's terribly awful. That's kind of the vibes I'm getting from any news we have, which is there's not much.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what we hope for. I'm kind of hoping he just takes the weekend off. We can lose a game against the Heat. That's one game. We can beat the Magic, and we could beat the Heat without Donovan Mitchell too. That's how well the Jazz are built. It's just the Heat are really, really they're a well-built team too. They're a tough matchup. So with or without Donovan Mitchell, that's going to be a fun game and a tough game.
Yeah. So in the end, that's kind of my takeaway. And again, with my Donovan Mitchell predictions, I thought he was going to be back in 2 weeks after his injury against the Pacers last year. So, take what I say with a grain of salt. we can make our predictions, but we're definitely not doctors, and we're definitely not insiders on that. But I'm excited for the Heat game tomorrow. That's going to be a big test to see where the Jazz are at, and hopefully they can be full force. But if they're not, like you said, they still have a shot. But the Heat have been playing incredibly well. They're a super impressive team. So it'll be an exciting weekend for the Jazz. Orlando withstanding.
100%. Well, with that, I think it kind of covers us up to where we're at. Next week, there's kind of for the next few weeks. I don't know how many, I didn't check, but we're expect to see the Tuesday, Thursday, and then 1 or 2 weekend games. It's kind of like the schedule the Jazz are on for a while, which it's kind of interesting. Now they kind of have, as an NBA player, normally you're just kind of all over the place, and now they kind of have a schedule that they can get into. That's one thing I'm always curious how much that matters for NBA players of getting into a rhythm like that. If it throws them off, what weeks, if they forget what day of the week it is. So I don't know how much that matters, but I don't think it will hurt. I think at least it will help a little bit. So
yeah,
I'm curious to see how that works.
It's exciting. So thank you so much to everyone for watching. Please follow us wherever you're at. Leave a like, share the video, see if there's a notifications option, and we really appreciate it. Thanks again, and go Jazz!